Now. All right, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another Tool Belt Tuesday here with the Office of Business Central. And today we'll be talking about pivoting in your career. During the live session, if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to click this link up here at the top of the slide. You can click that and a new dialog box will open and you can submit your questions that way. That just ensures that we don't miss anything. If you should do it within the Zoom chat, we want to make sure we don't lose it. And by doing it through the Google Slides, it gives us an opportunity to follow up with anyone after if we need to. So any questions along the way, feel free to either pause us and ask aloud or click that link, submit your question, and we'll make sure we get to it. All right, so who are we in the Office of Business Central? Well, my name is Brandon Aldis. I'm the Coordinator of Career Readiness. Prior to my time here at SUNY Adirondack, I've worked at SUNY Cobleskill as a residence hall director. I was at SUNY Empire State College as the coordinator of the Student Health and Wellness Initiative and Student Affairs. And then I was the customer service and sales team lead for sheetlabels.com. And now I'm here at SUNY Adirondack, and I have my undergraduate degree in agricultural business management from SUNY Cobleskill, and I just wrapped up my master's in higher education administration from Stony Brook University. So I'm very excited to be here. I love higher education. I love working with students on transitions, which is something that I've done in each of the positions that I've had an opportunity to be in. So whether it's transitioning into the real life and figuring out how to work on your career, or transitioning from, I don't know, one house to another, whatever you need help with, we're here to help. So I wanna make sure that we're here to support you. And if you need any tips on how to brew the best coffee, I am your guy.
And I'm Bonnie Stouffer. I'm the Director of Business Central. And I started my career in marketing and had a career shift into executive recruiting and executive coaching. And one of my passion areas is actually coaching people through career transitions. So I'm excited to talk about this today. And last year I joined the college, and Brandon and I are the two people responsible for Business Central. And we actually have three areas we're responsible for: economic development, inspiring entrepreneurship, and expanding career readiness skills within our student population. So we're happy to be here today and talking to you about one of our favorite topics.
So I'm also realizing that I didn't find Bonnie a new picture after I promised her I would. So this slide has a typo on it, which is not our fault. I stole this picture from the Google, and that's all. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm a bit of a quote junkie. I actually have, I collect quotes because I find them inspirational, funny, or very poignant at times. And this one is by Amelia Earhart. And this one really spoke to me regarding today's topic. The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. The fears are paper tigers. You can do anything you decide to do. You can act to change and control your life. And the procedure, the process is its own reward. So today we're going to map out a procedure and a process for you to follow so you can hit all those goals as you might want to pivot your career.
So what does this look like today? We're actually going to go over the 5 steps of a successful career transition. So we're going to reflect and prepare. We're going to do some possibilities, blue skies thinking. We're going to talk about building your ideal position. If you could have any position in the world, what would it be? We're going to clearly define transferable skills and talk about how you can clearly define yours. And then we're going to create an action plan, because if we're going to give you all this information, might as well be able to act on it, right? So we're gonna touch on like this really, really big theory called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow was this really cool guy who did some really cool studies. And essentially he determined that there are these different layers that people need to have in their life before they can achieve the next thing. So for example, on that very bottom level, you need food, shelter, and a place to sleep before you can ever feel safe in your surroundings. You need these fundamentals before you can ever get here. You need a place to live and food to eat, and you need to feel safe in your surroundings and comfortable and taken care of before you can ever feel love or belonging. So Maslow kind of says, if you don't have this, you'll never get this. And just making sure that we have those. And then up here at the top is eventually, someday, you may achieve self-actualization. So there are a bunch of different reports on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and a lot of research that has gone into it. It's very old. And some researchers and philosophers feel that most people will never reach self-actualization. We barely get to the point of feeling esteemed. So to get up to the top is a little bit more rare, but we think that you can get there, and we want to make sure we give you the tools you need to get there. And it's just making sure that you have all of those building blocks in place first. So when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and relating that back to a career transition, some people would be like, how are you even going to get these two things to connect? But they do. So you need to plan from the bottom upwards. So you need to make sure that you have these things taken care of so that you can keep moving up that hierarchy of needs. Are you ready to put in the work to succeed? That's a really big question I actually ask students on a lot of different playing fields. So not only when you're getting ready to transition into a career, but even when you're getting ready to jump majors and start a new major, or even just going to college or transferring from SUNY Adirondack to a four-year school after you get your degree. There's a lot of different times when you can ask yourself that question. Are you ready to put in the work to succeed? It is perfectly okay to say not right now and make a long-term plan. If you're still working on having a solid place to live, maybe now is the best time to start a new job if it's going to get you closer to that, but maybe you've got some other things you've got to take care of before you could even consider making a jump like a career shift. But this is a really important question that you have to ask yourself, and only you are going to have the right answer for you. So if you're ready, that's great. We can help you move forward. If you're not ready, please still feel free to reach out to us, because we have some different tips and tricks and tools in our tool belt that we can use to make sure that you build up this pyramid. Our goal is to make you keep climbing. We want you to be this little dude. I don't know what his name is, Carl. We want you to be Carl. We want you to climb this pyramid, this mountain. We want you to get to the top. And if you aren't ready to make a career shift, that's totally okay. But if there are pieces that we might be able to help with to help you get there someday, reach out and talk to us, that you, like Carl, can keep climbing the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That was deep.
Okay, can you tell that Brandon really likes Maslow?
Love Maslow.
He does. He absolutely does. So
And
step one in this process, the reflect and prepare stage. And this is where, when I'm coaching someone through a transition, I really want people to get clarity regarding, why are you making this transition? Some people, transitions happen in life. Sometimes they're forced on you, and sometimes you choose them to make them yourself. Transition is change. So it's really good to get clear on why you're making it. Sometimes you hate your boss. Sometimes you hate where you work. Sometimes you just know that you could do something where you could have a greater impact. It's really important to get clear on why you're making a transition so that you can make the right transition. So I challenge you to really think through why you're making it, and be honest with yourself. If it's, okay, I'm completely out of work and we're in the middle of this pandemic, I have to find a new job. Okay, great. That's where you're starting. That's absolutely great. If it's, I hate my boss, I can't do another day of this. Okay, that's great too. But be honest with yourself about it so you can chart the right path. Also encourage you to think through, what are the strengths that you're really itching to use? If what is it that at the end of the day you say, geez, I was frustrated because I didn't get to do whatever, or I really love this part of the day, I want to do more of it. Really be clear on what those strengths are. And that's going to help us to really look at how to get you using those strengths in a new role. What do you need to make a successful transition? So some people need, back to Maslow's, some people need to work closer to home. Right now, everyone's working from their homes. So, that might not be quite as relevant. But sometimes, you know, there are other things that you need to put in place to make that successful transition. Sometimes, you know, you need to get your car fixed so that you can drive to work, or you need to figure out different elements of your life. And then who's on your team to help you be successful? So, you know, do you have childcare if you need it, if you're going to be working out of the house? You know, do you have somebody to help with the dog, or doggy daycare for your dog? Whatever it is, look at what are those other elements to your life that you need to put in place so that you can make sure that you're successful. And sometimes you have to think about, you know, saving up some money so you've got some cushion, so that when you make the job transition, you know that you've got, you know, some money in the bank to get you through that, because you need a new wardrobe. But, you know, brainstorm who's on your team and what are those resources you need to ensure this is successful. Then we're going to move into step 2. This is where I want you to really think through that top of the pyramid, right? So think about, what is it in the big picture? If you really could do anything you wanted, what would it be? What would it look like? And this is where I really challenge people to do some blue sky thinking. Grab a journal, grab your favorite pens, your crayons, your colored pencils, whatever. Just go for a walk in nature, sit outside, and really give yourself some mind space and time to think through the ideal and jot it down. This is where you're gonna write down whatever's coming to you, and really just give yourself the luxury of brainstorming and really thinking it through. You're not filtering it. You just, you know, think about how it feels, what it looks like. To give you an example on this, I did this exercise years ago, and I had this vision of a certain office with a window that had great light coming in, a certain color of the walls, the feeling of my team. And it was probably like 5 years later, I realized, as I was having a team meeting in my office, oh my gosh, I had actually visualized working with this kind of team. And it can be really powerful. So I really want you to get out, shake your brain up a little bit by getting out and not thinking, oh, I'm going to do this while sitting at my desk. Think big and broad. Don't filter your thoughts, just capture them. I want you to think through, what are some of those wins? When you think about what you're most proud of, what were those wins? Maybe it's not in your work. Maybe it's in a volunteer job. Maybe it was helping in a school somewhere. Maybe it was helping, you know, in a community event or a church event. What are some of the things that you look at and say, I'm really proud of what I was able to contribute and how I was able to impact this situation? Think about the energy. Think about when you've worked on something where you've been completely in the zone, where if you kept doing it, you could do it till 1 o'clock in the morning. You just had that energy. You just felt like you were firing on all cylinders and you absolutely loved it. Think about your strengths. Think about what people have said, geez, you're so good at that. I always love to come to you for this because you always have an answer. You're always able to help me solve a problem. Think about the things that you've gotten praise for. You're just going to capture all of that down. It doesn't have to be pretty, or it can be pretty. Could be bullets, could be just, you know, you could do some collaging even, cut up some magazines. Just do some possibilities thinking, big, broad, get it all down. Then we're going to move into the step 3. So step three is where, okay, you've done all this big picture thinking. Now I want you to brainstorm what that ideal job really looks like. Some of the resources out there that can really help you, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has ONET Online, and the URL is in the PowerPoint. And this is a fantastic resource. You can find different career pathways, job trends, salaries. There's information out there for veterans. There's tons of information out there. And one of the reasons why I like to use this is because once you start clicking around in there, it can really lead you to some other things. So if you end up finding a job pathway and you say, geez, I want this job title, it'll tell you, can find out what's the prospect and outlook for that job and what's the outlook for that job in your region. And it gives you just some really good data to go on. So start capturing what some of those ideal jobs might look like, so that we can get into some real job search strategy down the road. So again, you're building the ideal. You're not doing a ton of filtering at this point. You're just capturing what those options are. College Central Network is another good resource. Brandon, do you want to say anything about College Central Network specific to this?
I would say that it's another good opportunity to be able to put in some of those keywords that you're looking for, especially geographically, right? So if you're trying to find your ideal job, College Central Network makes it really hard to search some of those geographic locations as well, or whether you want to use your degree or really whatever. So if you have some of this criteria percolating in your mind about what your ideal job could be, some of that criteria are actually searchable filters in College Central Network that you could use to pull up some of those blue sky job descriptions and take a glance at those. So I just think there's a lot of different criteria you can search by in College Central Network that might be useful in your idealization phase.
Great, thank you.
Idealization, is that a word? I don't
It
know.
is now.
It is now. I'm writing to Webster's as we speak.
LinkedIn, you can use LinkedIn and search within LinkedIn in a number of ways. If you've built out your LinkedIn and you have a number of groups and companies and organizations that you're following, you could search within content within your news feed. You could go to jobs and start searching some jobs that are out there. And again, at this point, I wouldn't even worry about, well, that job's not in my area or geographic area. Find them, just find them, find the job postings, because you'll use it down the road. But find the job postings and start thinking about, geez, maybe that is something I want to do down the road. But you're collecting at this point, you're not filtering. So you're collecting your options and building that out, that ideal. The other way to use LinkedIn is if you have built out your network and you've got a number of people you're connected to, start putting in those titles as search terms and see if you know anyone with those titles. But again, you're collecting at this point. You're then going to use it down the road. But that's building the ideal is really important. One of the things I tell people, especially when they're transitioning, is you know, if you don't build your ideal, you could end up just doing the same old thing again. So give yourself lots of options to consider.
The word I was looking for is ideation.
That's a good one.
That's why I'm having more coffee.
Okay. All right, so then step 3, continued. So when you've got some of those options, then I want you to also brainstorm and start thinking through what's the type of organization that you want to work for. You know, what's the size? What's the structure? Is it a for-profit, not-for-profit? Are they very mission-driven? Are they on a growth trajectory, or is it more of an established organization that's been around a long time? Is there an element of diversity that you're looking for, whether it's, you know, the age groups or the age groups that you're working with? But think about what are those things that are important to you in an organization? You know, some people, I've worked for a number of startups. I absolutely loved working for startups, but I also know right now in my career, I don't want to work for a startup. I loved it back in the day, but right now I don't want to do that. So think through what are the types of organizations you want to work for. And then what's the kind of work that you care about? Do you want to be hands-on, or do you want to be behind the scenes? What does it really look like at the end of the day? What is it you've done during your day? For me, when I started brainstorming what I wanted next in a career after doing executive recruiting, I envisioned a line out my office of students who wanted help with their careers. And that was my vision. I still want a line out my office door of students who want help with their career transitions. And that's important to me. It's important for me to have that hands-on and be able to coach and guide people in their careers. So what kind of skills and strengths do you have that you want to use more in your ideal next job? So you've done a lot of this brainstorming, you've done a lot of this ideation, so now you're really starting to pull it together and helping to put some language around the skills and strengths, because those are those keywords that you're going to end up using in your job search as you're looking for those job postings. What types of relationships do you want to have at work? What's that reporting structure, and where do you fall? And this is an important one because relationships are so important at work. I think for Brandon and I, and you know, we had a very good way of working and throwing the ball back and forth, so to speak, when we worked in the office. So when we transitioned to working remotely, now we do it via Google Docs and electronically. And it's important to know what those kinds of relationships are. Are you more the type of person who you want to come in and be told every day, here's your list of tasks by your boss, and here's what you want to do? Okay, well then you need to look for that in a role. Some people like that, some people don't prefer that. Just be clear with yourself about what those relationships are that you want. Do you want to supervise people? Do you want to be an individual contributor? And then really, what does a great day look like? So at the end of the day, when you're shutting down your computer or walking out the door, whatever it is you've just done, what does that look like? This is where you're still going to be looking at, you're mapping it out. So then you're going to use all of this information on this ideal to evaluate opportunities against it. Any questions?
When you're working with people through this phase, and as people are starting to do their research and think about what their ideal job looks like, is this also a time when they're considering salaries, fringe benefit packages, those types of things?
It is important for you to start thinking through that and being honest with yourself. I mean, some of the ideal jobs that I would love to do wouldn't enable me to put my sons through college. And that's another thing that's important to me. You know, at some point I might do that, you know, career-wise, but right now that's not viable for me. So it is important to consider that. But I wouldn't, at this point in building the ideal and considering what those job and, you know, salary bands and benefits might be, don't lose sight of some of the elements in the ideal just to focus on money. If you just focus on the money, you could be back doing this job transition conversation again really quickly, because you could end up taking something for money and benefits that ultimately is not what you want to do. So you know, go back to Maslow. Okay, if you're down here and you need to make sure that you have enough money to have those basics, yes, let's be real about this. What is it going to take? And mapping things out and making sure you've got yourself, you know, in a place where you are safe and you have the resources to live. But I also don't want you to lose sight of some of the ideal components.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Would you say that this is also the time where you should be thinking about sort of where you see yourself going? So just as an example, I was recently talking with someone who was very concerned about her education. She has an associate's degree, but has known that she wants to go on for a bachelor's, but really knows that right now she needs a job to be able to sustain herself and her family. So as we were talking about potential careers or opportunities, we talked a lot about a fringe benefit package that may be offered by a company who also values education and would therefore support her in going through her bachelor's degree. Is this another thing that you should be throwing down as you're in this, that word that I can't say, that ideation phase?
Yes. So, you know, another point on that is that the ONET tool will give you good career pathing. So if you identify that, geez, I really want to be an accounting clerk. Well, if you go out to ONET and you start looking at career pathing for accounting clerks, they actually map out a lot of options. And then you can say, all right, I want to be an accounting clerk in this kind of industry or that kind of industry, and map that out as well. And ONET actually has salary bands in there so that you can research all of that. So yes, I mean, it's interesting to see the career pathing of different roles evolve as society evolves. It's going to be interesting post COVID to see how some of that opens things up for people. And I really believe it is going to open things up. So now's a good time, actually. There's so much change going on. Now is a good time to think about career transitions for everyone except Brandon Aldis.
And Bonnie Stover.
So step 4, clearly define your transferable skills. Back to some of that initial blue sky thinking. So when you started mapping out what you love to do, and you started mapping out, you know, when were you using your best energy? What did that look like? What were those skills? What was it you were actually doing? Map those out. And this is where now we're starting to bridge into what your strategy will be for your job search strategy, and also some of your interview skill training. Because what I want you to do here is really look at the skills you want to use in your new ideal role. So you may have used 10 different skills in your most recent job, and there are 3 of them you absolutely want to do again, and there are 3 of them you never ever want in your job again. This is where you're going to get clear about that. So look at the things you really want to do in your new role, and I want you to brainstorm your brag book. So you're going to brainstorm using this START model. So this is where you're going to brainstorm your transferable skills. So you actually could probably start at the bottom and say, all right, what are those transferable skills, those say 4 or 5 that I absolutely know that I have that I want to use? Name it, just name it, put it down. Now I want you to go back up to the top and say, all right, when did I use this? Brainstorm the situation. What was the context that you used it in? What was the challenge? The reason why I'm having you do this is because these will essentially become your little mini case studies that you're going to use to answer questions when you are interviewed, right? So what was the situation? Give a nice, crisp, clearly defined challenge where you used that transferable skill. What was the team? Were you an individual contributor reporting upward? Were you a business owner? Were you part of a team? Were you leading a team? Were you remote or in person? And this is going to be a key thing that I think as we move forward, where there's so much remote work going on right now, that I do think that it's going to be important to define for people how you used your skill sets in a remote situation, and maybe how that translates to in-person or vice versa. But being clear on, I have this skill set and I'm really good at it in a remote situation or in person, or both, right? Actions. Be specific. What were the actions that you took? What was it you did that led to success in this situation? And then what were the results? How did you meet or exceed the goal? And these are things that are measurable. So this essentially is going to enable you to tell a story where you can say to someone, and I'll use myself as an example here. So when I interviewed about a year ago for the role that I'm in now, I was asked questions around coaching. How did I help people with progression in their careers? And I gave examples regarding, you know, as a team manager, I had a situation where I had someone on my team who was in an account service role, but his strength was really in finance. As the leader of the team, I needed to think through how best to use his strengths while ensuring the team still met their goals. So the actions I took were that I talked through with the team member where I saw his strengths, where I saw his challenges, and I explained to him that in the role he was in, he needed to have account management, account service responsibilities, but that I saw his experience in finance as being potentially a greater strength for his, And did that line up with his desires in his career? The result of this was that I essentially found out that he didn't like the account service side of what he was doing. He would prefer to transfer to finance, but he wanted to make sure that he could continue to support me as a leader of the team. So he wanted to be the finance resource supporting my whole team versus just the one account he had been working on. So that transferable skill that I brought, I could bring to SUNY Adirondack, was that I have a strength at uncovering people's strengths and finding them opportunities to use them, whether in their current job or in future jobs. So does that make sense? So what you want to do is figure out what that mini case study is so that you can have a story for each of your transferable skills. Okay? So now that you've got those transferable skills down, I'm going to go to step 5. And this is where you're creating your action plan. And if you were with us for the job search strategy session, we really encourage you to have a job search tracker that you create. I could create you one, but it's important for everyone to have their own because we all think differently. We organize information differently. I encourage people to use Excel or Word doc or Google Doc, something where you can have some columns and really start tracking out the companies that you're going to research that might fit your ideal. You're going to do some research, maybe look at best places to work, figuring out who you know within that industry or type of role, and figuring out the roles and job titles that align with your ideal job and those transferable skills that you've just mapped out. And you can use all those same resources again, the ONET, the LinkedIn, College Central Network. You could just use Google and just use Google. Google, you can find everything, right? But find out what those jobs are, the industries, the companies. This is where you're going to really map out your action plan and really map out your career job search strategy.
All right. So what questions does anyone have? I would also just offer the tidbit that within College Central Network, there are also, there's the career document library there. And those are documents that Bonnie and I have written and uploaded, as well as documents provided to us by College Central Network. And a few of those documents are just lists of transferable skills and how to talk to them. So talk about them and how they apply to you. But there are a bunch of different worksheets and tools in there that would be really valuable to you as you're doing this ideation and research. So I would encourage people to jump in there too.
You know, one last thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned is switching industries may seem impossible, and I don't want you to think it is, because I'm actually a really good example of that. I've switched industries and types of roles a couple of times. And when I wanted to get into higher ed, I actually did the process that I just mapped out for you. I went through that process. I have folders of notes that I took. I interviewed people in higher education who were heads of career centers. And, you know, I heard everything from there's no way you'll get a job in higher ed unless you've ever worked in higher ed. Like basically it's a closed industry. If you've never done it, they're not going to want you. To probably the best advice that I received was, you know, find a way to volunteer within higher ed so that you can use your industry career coaching in a higher ed setting and just build up your experience doing that. And the reason I say that was probably the best advice is because that's how I framed my cover letter and my job application for the role that I'm in now. So please don't think it's impossible to shift industries or shift career paths, because there is a way. If you focus back on those transferable skills, there's a strategy you can find to get there. It might not happen overnight. You might have to do some different things. Like I volunteered at the Career Services Center at Skidmore College for a number of years. And that gave me some good experience to build on and talk about as I was interviewing at SUNY Adirondack. So please don't think it's impossible. I love to help people figure out ways to connect those dots. So if that's you, please let me know.
Absolutely.
Just a quick question, and I think you probably just covered that, but my concern is I'm completely switching industries, or my goal is to completely switch industries. I've worked in a financial planning office for the past 20 years, and I want to do ag policy with the ag business management degree. Should I be looking for volunteer opportunities with Ag Stewardship Association and New York Animal Ag Coalition to go along with potential internships? I mean, I was a 4-H leader, so I did volunteer work there. But would there be other places I should look to start doing volunteer work?
Brandon, you want to take that?
Totally. So, Lori, I think for you, you're a little bit unique too, because you have experience in the industry, right? So, whereas you've maybe never worked in policy writing, you have been on the backhand of being handed down policy, right? So, you maybe didn't write the policy, but you've been affected by policy. And so, I think for you, having the experience of, you have the industry experience. So I think it's a little bit different. I think what Bonnie was saying in Bonnie's example is that she had never worked for a college before. So wanting to come and work for a college, she had no experience of ever working for a college. So being able to volunteer and gain that and be able to speak to it in her cover letter was awesome. But then for you, when you look at applying that to where you're at and what, just from working with you, where I know where you're headed and what you're trying to do, I think that you've got the industry experience to speak to it. Now, internships and volunteer work are always going to look phenomenal on your resume. They are always going to look like you're trying to gain more knowledge, you're trying to gain a new skill set, you're trying to have an influence. So they're always going to look really good. So for you, I think the next step for you, because you're also completing your degree, is to get that internship. And through that internship, you're going to gain real skills. You're going to gain hands-on knowledge. And then after that internship, you'll have a better idea of where you want to land and what type of organizations you want to land with. So for you, and again, this is very Lori directed, I would say, let's get that internship and figure out where you land on the policy stuff and what you like doing, and then look for opportunity after that. Because I think with your previous life experiences coupled with the college internship that you end up doing, you're going to have a pretty awesome looking resume. Let's figure out what that next step would be for you after you get those check boxes checked off. Does that make sense? And Bonnie, please chime in or throw anything at us.
So there are two things I'd add to that. I think doing any of the volunteer work and internships also helps you with your network building. And, you know, for me to be able to put on my application at SUNY Adirondack that they could call the director of the Career Services Center at Skidmore and ask for a reference, that was a good thing. So network building, really important. The other, and this speaks to the transferable skills. Again, you get into any of your volunteer work, you get into any of the internships, and the things that you're bringing to this new industry, these new roles, those transferable skills really start coming to life in a new role. And that gives you those mini case studies to map out in your brainstorming around not only the job search, but when you get ready to interview. So transferable skills and networking, really important.
Thank you. And I guess that probably brings up another question for me, because you mentioned references and being able to use people for references. I guess, what is the best approach to ask people if you can use them for a reference?
Good
Just
question. So generally what I recommend, and keep in mind, I also did executive recruiting where I was placing people from mid-level to very senior CEO type level executives. And there are a few best practices on references. So you always want to make sure that your references know that you're going to potentially ask them to be a reference, and provide them with the job description and a current copy of your resume so that they can see how it aligns. And tell your reference, this is, I want this job because I want to use these 3 strengths, and here's where I see myself headed career-wise, so they know some background information on how to connect those dots. And you're not asking them to tell a particular story about you, but you want to give them some context as to where you're headed career-wise, so that they can start thinking of the examples of the work that you've done when working for them or with them, so that they can bring you to life in the conversation that they might have as far as your capabilities in being referenced. The other thing, a lot of times, depending on the company, there are companies that they have a policy that they will not, the only thing that they'll give for information on a reference is, yes, she worked here from this state to this state, and that's it. Some companies have those policies because they're industry regulated, and they just, that is what it is. So, if you're in one of those types of industries and your former supervisor can only say that, okay, great. Well, you use them for that part of the reference, but if your potential employer really wants to understand how you worked and the dynamics, you may have to look for other people that can speak to that. So sometimes that might be someone that saw you in a different type of role who can speak to your capabilities or your character or ethics or decision making. I always have thought about references. You want somebody as maybe who had been a previous supervisor, somebody who had been a coworker who you had to collaborate with, maybe a cross-functional a team member, maybe somebody that you supervised, so that they can speak to your ability to guide and develop their career or provide good direction so that work got done. So, you'll have to think through that as it pertains to the role that you're going for. And if you are being asked, can you please provide us with the names of 3 references? I have always recommended that people say back to the potential employer, what are their particular references that you'd like? Would you like a supervisor, a coworker, a direct report, a past client, or a vendor? Get clear on who you might want to be asking for a reference, but think through who could tell your story and create a master reference list well in advance, so you have people's names and contact information. Then you can reach out and give them a heads up and share the job description, that sort of thing. Does that help?
very much so. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? All right, so I'll just remind everyone that we are always here. So if anyone ever wants to schedule a one-on-one, please feel free to do so. Bonnie and I can still meet with you just like this. We can review your cover letter, resume, go over your job search strategy, help you figure out where to start that ideation phase. Now that I figured out how to say that word, I'm just gonna keep using it again and again and again. It's because I finished my cup of coffee. So we can help you with that, and we can hopefully get you to where you wanna be. I'm seeing the chat thingy. Oh, yeah, no problem, Lori. Glad you loved it. So please feel free to schedule a one-on-one with us if you want more in-depth stuff. And feel free to follow us on social media. We are having a lot of fun there. And hopefully we gain more followers and you continue to be part of the fun. So check it out. hopefully everything is going well for everyone. And if you need anything, you know how to get a hold of us. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.